Hey, good morning, everybody. It's me. I'm back, Robert Phoenix, albeit slightly later than normal, usual. The Sunday night show, I wouldn't say it takes a lot out of me, but it definitely has a level of intensity that I get into, and usually runs me up to about 11 o'clock at night. So Monday I like to try to take it a little bit easier and be a little bit more relaxed when it comes to actually doing the live stream. So hopefully some people will pick up on this live, and we got 12 people already. And then if not, of course, there'll be the broadcast later on. Hey, there's Beth Berry and Judy Anderson. Good morning, the two of you. So I'm going to hang out here a little bit, and the show itself today will not be terribly long. I'm just going to be running about 45 minutes or so. Morning, Daniel, Mary, Fifth Wall, aka Kestrel. What's going on? So yeah, it's gonna be. What I'm gonna do today is I'm just gonna give you some insight. Hey, there's Joe Mama. As to what's going on behind the walls of the great Chopistan, Chazistan, which is not real pretty. Morning, Natasha. Tinfoil Tier, what's going on there? TFT. Yeah, it's not real pretty, and I have some thoughts about that in and of itself and what we're witnessing. I got into a lot of that last night. I talked about the links between Jenny Durkin and Raz Simone, aka Solomon Simone, who is the owner of a number of businesses in Seattle. So actually a really good capitalist. Seems like a lot of the capital that came in his direction actually came from outside sources. I've already gotten into the connection between him and Dubai, because apparently he's visited Dubai and had some very interesting relationships there. What's going on, Kevin? Nice to see you. Christine Mose, what's going on? FUP77. And there's Rob. Rob, you're like Easy Rider now, man. It's the Rob Chopra tour. By the way, there was a lot of talk last night about the gathering or the get together here in October, and I'm going to start to make some phone calls today around that. And I'm going to reach out to Into the Hills, and I'm going to reach out to some other folks who can help me organize this thing. So I'm going to be working on it. That's part of today's plan, structure, organization, the one-man band. Essentially, we're in about 5 or 6 different hats, but I have no other life really to speak of, to be honest. So this really pretty much is my life. This and doing the work with the clients and being amused by Jasper and Rosie. So hey, this is it. This is the distillation of the purpose, and may as well take advantage of it while I can, and we what we can. Morning, Faith. Good to see you in there. There's Frank Bry. What's happening, Frank? Equicentric in the house. And there's Dawn and Maury together in Pensacola. Emerald V. Hello, Emerald V. Thanks, Mary. Appreciate your kind words. Yeah, man, last night was a pretty good show, I have to say, because there's just so much content floating around. And if you, hey, Jack, what's happening? Good morning. Anna Wilson. And from Nottingham, Leon from Nottingham. All right, Leon Luis. Hey, good to see you, man. Good to see you. Not on Facebook much, but it's good to see you here. Thanks for joining us. Charles Mazik. What's going on, Charles? Pretty one-pointed. Happy my neighbor shares her dog with me. So I got a personal story here, and there's my man David. What's going on? Persian scribe in the house. Nice. So why don't we just get into the invocation here a little bit, and then we have Benjamin Hunt checking in from Eugene, Oregon. Nice to see you, Benjamin. Welcome to the show. Here we go. Dear blessed Holy Father, Mother God, the great central Sun, within the universal light. The universal light. You know what that means? That means everybody's light, not just a light for a particular individual or particular group. This is the universal light, which is the light of Yeshua, Sananda, Emmanuel, okay? It is through this light that we ask that only the highest and best information come through this channel, literally and figuratively, so that everybody can participate and be uplifted, and that they may have the highest and best information and wisdom in their own lives come through to them as well. We also ask for strength and courage, for faith, for empathy, for compassion, and more importantly, and most importantly, perhaps, humor as we navigate through these times. And in so doing, any karmic residue that each and every one of us share or might have together is clarified, purified, cleansed, and removed from our experience so that we may re-enter our lives as sovereign beings at the end of this transmission. Thank you, and we give thanks. So be it. So I'm gonna where do I start? All right. So let me see if I can bust this out. Do I want to bust this out right now? I just have to think about this. I'm going to sit on this. My intuition is telling me to sit on this. I don't want to talk about it right now, but it's a really cool development. It's nothing bad, okay? It's nothing bad. It's a really, really cool development, and I'm working on it. By the way, I've been in touch with Penny Kelly, and Penny Kelly has agreed to be on the show. So that's a good thing. So we're going to have Penny Kelly on, I think, sometime in July. I think maybe the Friday after this Friday. I just have to communicate with her and reach out. So Steve and Ani, I don't know if you're in the chat today, probably not. But you probably say, oh, Robert's not doing this. I apologize. You're okay. But Penny Kelly's going to be on the show. It'll be a really good show. I think a lot of you like her stuff, and I'm looking forward to interviewing her. So that'll be two Fridays from now. Also, I believe, if I'm not mistaken, I'm actually doing a pre-record with Ole Damigard this week. I think that's happening on, let's see, what is today? 22nd, 2 days from now. So on Wednesday, I'll be doing a pre-record with Ole Damigard. And, you know, if you know Ole's work, it's pretty exceptional. This is a guy who tracks false flags all around the planet. And he's basically saying, he'll spend 2 hours with me. So I may just do that. I may just jam on 2 hours with Ole Damigard and play that this Friday. I think it could be really, really cool. So that's something, so there's a lot of stuff to look forward to here with this channel, either this channel or the other channel, which is the 11th house. That's where we do interviews every Friday. And that's also where I do the Sunday night Astro live stream. So you get a lot of bang for your Federal Reserve notes here. And if you want to subscribe and be a part of that, feel free to. I'll have a link here at the end of the show. So let's just jump into sort of where we're at right now, or theoretically where we are at. We made it through the eclipse. The eclipse energy is pretty powerful. At least it was for me. Did we enter into World War III? Well, remember now, the eclipse energy, technically speaking, is 2.5 weeks before and 2.5 weeks after, and even stretching out to 6 months on another time scale. Okay, so just keep that in mind. That's important to remember, because it links us up with the last eclipse, and that happened roughly 6 months ago. And I talked about that. I've talked about it before. That was the eclipse that crossed over. We talked about that on Friday with Masaki Miyagawa. And Shannon Marie says, what's up with all the ongoing fireworks over Oakland, California? Is like a war zone. Oh, yeah. Yeah, and where do they get the fireworks, too? I mean, I live in a place where they actually sell fireworks, and you can't get fireworks now. It's not an essential service. Normally, I like to buy fireworks for 4th of July. No. So they're getting fireworks through underground channels. I remember a long time ago, me and my buddy, we were in college. We went to Chinatown. We were hanging around Chinatown, and we were there to buy firecrackers, and because that's what you did in California. If you wanted to buy fireworks, you go to Chinatown, right? So we went to Chinatown, and of course, me and my buddy, we generally traveled in an altered state. So we're hanging out in Chinatown, and we walk up, and we started rapping with this young Chinese guy about buying firecrackers. I think we bought like a brick or something like that. And maybe we got some, I don't know, maybe M80s or something. I don't know. Anyway, this young Chinese guy he couldn't have been more than like 17 or 18 years old. He's rapping with us, and he says, yeah, man, we fucking own this town. We own this fucking town. Like, oh, really? Okay, so we got a 17-year-old, 18-year-old telling us that he and his crew, we run Chinatown. All right, cool. It was the sheer bravado itself was noteworthy, and on some level even slightly inspiring. Right? That's what you call ownership, and that's what's taking place in Chazopistan, Chazopistan, which I believe now is becoming a social experiment. And on some level, it's completely failing. And by the way, you're now seeing Raz Simone, like he's moving off into the background. He may not even be there right now. He may not even be there. But again, last night, I showed everybody watched the stream last night. The city of Seattle granted him and his company Umbrella Recording. And I'm pretty sure that cyber cafe was also his cafe. I'm not sure about the Zulu dance space or whatever, Zulu open space. Maybe that was him too. I don't know. But clearly we know that Umbrella is his label. Umbrella is his recording studio. He got $83,000 for that. $83,000. So he had an ongoing relationship with the city of Seattle and an ongoing relationship with Jenny Durkin. I would not be surprised at all if the two of them sat down and planned this whole thing out. You know, Jenny Durkin has been somebody who has been avidly anti-police, avidly anti-cop, avidly anti-order. You know, if you go back and watch that video, which I highly recommend, called "Seattle is Dying," was produced by KOMO TV, you'll see that this has been in place for a while, that they've been working on the catch and release program, and noting that 30 people who have been arrested 35 to 40 times have been, you know, let back onto the streets again and again and again to do the same thing over and over again. And that in and of itself is a bit of a mind control program, right? It's getting people used to this idea that there is no order, that their lives are now moving into a realm of chaos and disorder, and that is part of the deal. Now, I'm going to say this, and you may take it wrong, or you may understand where I'm coming from, and it's not meant to offend anybody, but Jenny Durkin happens to be lesbian/gay. Okay, so that's fine. You want to do that. You know, Emily is lesbian, gay, right? We work together. I love her to death. I know other people, both on the male side and the female side, right, who have different kinds of ways in which they want to experience their intimacy, right? It's not the way that I do it, or maybe you do it, but it's their way, and I get it, right? And it's like I work with people as individuals. I don't work with people in terms of ideologies. I've never been that way. If you're an asshole, you know, it doesn't matter what your orientation is. I'm not into you, right? I'm just not into you. I used to go to this place in Point Richmond, where I lived, and it was called the Hotel Mac. Okay, and I loved that place. I have really great memories of going to the Hotel Mac and spending way too much money. I have so many stories about that place. It's just nuts, right? It was just right around the corner. It was dangerous. I'd just be able to walk out of my house and just go right down to the Hotel Mac, hit happy hour, and then extend happy hour beyond happy. I got stories up the wazoo from that place. So the really weird story. Here's just a really weird story. Okay, really, really weird story. But I'll tell you the other story too. So one night I'm in there, and on Friday nights they would have like half off of a bottle of wine. It was like a really great deal, and they had a great wine selection. So this guy rolls in, and he starts to buy Opus One, which is the Rothschild's bottle. He doesn't buy just one bottle of Opus One. He buys like 4 bottles consecutively over the course of the night. So those bottles of Opus One, I believe, were going for $250 a bottle. So he was spending $125, which I guess during a happy hour is a really, really good deal, right? Anyway, I'm not really that close to the guy in proximity. You know, I'm at the end of the bar, and it's an L shape, and he's on the other side of the L. I'm on the kind of the L side, kind of looking at the bar. So I'm drinking my own wine, whatever, but I'm joining in the conversation. And by the time the third bottle rolls around, like, he's pouring for everybody. So I got and I got to drink out of, I think, 2, maybe 3. I think I got to drink out of 3 of the 4 bottles of Opus One. I've never had it before, haven't had it since. And I could tell you that every single glass or, sip that I had, it was in every single glass that was different, right? It was different. I thought, wow, this is really interesting. Like every single one of these is just different. And it was actually a pretty extraordinary wine. If you're into wine, it's an extraordinary wine. You know why it's like $250 a bottle, maybe more now. Of course, that's the Rothschild Vineyard. Anyway, so I'm there, I'm hanging out, and there was this Irish guy, and super cool guy, great guy, just very, very jovial, like the Irish are. I'm part Irish. So he had been involved in the restaurant business there in Point Richmond, and that restaurant business tanked. He couldn't hold it together, right? Anyway, so it all ends, the frivolity and everything ends. And so we go home, or I go home to my place. Anyway, I get up the next day and I see the guy who had bought all the bottles of Opus One. He's like the first person I see. Now he's not from Point Richmond. Okay, he's not from Point Richmond. He's traveling. And I see him. He's the first person I see, and he staggers across the street in Point Richmond. Just kind of, I'm like, oh boy, that guy had a rough night. And then I wind up seeing the Irish guy a little bit later in the day because it was right around Halloween. So I think they had a Halloween fair in town that day. And so I noted the Irish guy. I kind of said hello. And apparently the guy who bought all the wine stayed at the Irish guy's place. He crashed on his couch. Okay, fine. The Irish guy was being cool, whatever. About 3 weeks later, the Irish guy is dead. He's dead. Now, the word is that he committed suicide. All right. Now, I'm not linking the guy who bought the wine and the Irish guy together. I'm not doing that. Okay. I'm not doing that. But it was odd that 3 weeks later, this Irish guy who was very jovial, right? And everybody around town knew him, supposedly blew his brains out. And it was blew me away. I was like, holy shit. I just saw this guy 3 weeks ago, and he was happy as a leprechaun. And boy, I'm going to be talking about a leprechaun tonight, or today rather. I got a leprechaun story. It's the world we're living in now. We are living in bizarre world, and it has to do with a leprechaun. All right, and this is not the. Hey, Ani, nice to see you. Thanks for being here. I appreciate that. So I'm going to talk about this whole leprechaun thing. I got some shit today I'm going to share with you. It's going to blow your mind. It's going to give you an idea of the world we're living in, or the world that they're trying to impose upon us. And it is flat out NUTS capital all the way through, right? This is nuts. They are essentially doing everything they can in their power to turn our reality or in our domain into an insane asylum. Okay. That will all be on some form of 5150 lockdown. That's where we're happy. That's what's going on. But the original story I wanted to share with you about the Hotel Mac is one of the first times I went there and I hung out. I was pretty new to the area, and I was there with a friend of mine. This is a totally nuts story. Okay, really, really nuts story. I was there with a friend of mine, and I'm sure he doesn't watch my show anymore because we're not really friends anymore. But anyway, I'm going to tell the story. I'm not going to say his name. So we're going there, and there was this transsexual who used to hang out at the Hotel Mac, and I'm not going to say this person's name, okay, but a very friendly person, and I got on with this person quite well actually, and they. Man, this person was former special forces. They showed me their picture when they were special forces in the uniform and medaled up and everything. Okay. And this person was I'm 6'3", maybe 6'2" now because of my back situation. This person was about 6'3", 6'4", and really built. Okay. Built. So, formidable. This is a formidable individual, right? Knowing that this person was special forces, clearly you do not want to mess with this person. Once you knew, I wouldn't want to mess with the person anyway. He's just a nice person. So anyway, we're hanging out. Me and my buddy, we're hanging out at the hotel bar, and of course, copious amounts of alcohol are being consumed. I, on the one hand, being Irish, have no problem. My friend, on the other hand, has a problem. He always had a problem, and after about 3 libations in, he would completely kind of go off the res. Okay, and I would try to pace him because I knew it, right? I knew it's like, man, for the first 2 or 3, he was like the best dude on the planet, the best dude on the planet. Once you got to 4 and 5, it was like, okay, who's showing up, right? Who's showing up? So we're talking, we're hanging out, we're having a great time, and the former special forces person is, we're connecting and hanging out, and it's all good, right? It's all good. But as the night wears on, it's, later and later and later, we wind up closing the place up, and then we go back to, this person's place, right, to go hang out. And my friend wanted to partake in some other kind of, how shall we say, medicinal activity. I did not. That's not my thing. And the next thing I know, like my friend is like, making out with former special forces dude. And it was like, okay, well, there you go. Whatever floats your boat. It's all, hey, have your Lola moment, right? So he was wrecked though. And that night went terribly wrong, because then another guy showed up, and it was the violent guy. I was like, I got to put you in deep freeze. And that happened for a while until, of course, he came back and expressed a great deal of contrition for how he behaved. Not with that person. I don't give a shit. If you wanted to make out with former special forces guy, gal, that's fine. That was a nice person. It was a really interesting, nice person, right? A cool person. I don't give a shit, right? But he did other stuff that night, which I was not really fond of. Like wrecking my couch. I don't even want to talk about that. But he did facilitate me buying a new couch. So thank you for that. Anyway, no longer connected, no longer friends. But that was Point Richmond. That was the Hotel Mac, was really a trip. And a lot of these characters would come in here. It was also a place that was haunted. And it was a bar, restaurant, and then above it was a series of rooms for like a hotel, not really a bed and breakfast, but more like a hotel. And I really enjoyed hanging out there. And let me give you just one of the little story, little tidbit. This is I think one of the best stories in my life. And this is kind of like on the back end of Father's Day, because I really didn't talk about my father very much on my show last night, but I'm going to share this story with you. It's a really good story. So my father was dying. Okay. And I had him over, he and my mother, and they were living up by Nevada City, Grass Valley, that area, a place called El Dorado Hills. So they came down, and they had a room that they were staying at, not at my place, at a very small place, but I had them over for dinner, and I made dinner for them, and we had a really good dinner. And then we drove down to the Hotel Mac to have a little bit of dessert, right? And there was a guy who was the manager of the bar in the restaurant. He was the son of the owner of the hotel. And previously that summer, he had threatened to kick me out because I was pissed that they were showing something on TV that I didn't really want to watch, right? I wanted to watch a different event. It was, I think, in some ways a more compelling event. And these two guys were at the bar, and they had already kind of commandeered the TV. So I basically called them out on it and said, why are we watching this? This has no relevance to this area, right? I think I wanted to watch some kind of a local sporting event or something. And so one of the owner's son, the guy who is the manager of the bar, got pissed at me, and he threatened to throw me out because of it. And I said, look, man, just relax. It's like, I apologize for that. I just couldn't understand why we weren't watching this. So, I backed him off the ledge, and we actually became pretty close in a lot of ways. And I guess there's some interesting stories around that too, but not that we hung out or anything, but it's certainly an interesting story. So anyway, we mended the fence, and I brought my parents in, and I'll never forget, it was a Monday night. It was raining. It was cold. We go in, we sit in the kind of the loungy area, which, right out of another time, like 1920s, 1930s. We sat down, and the waitress came over. I actually became friends with the waitress, nice young gal. And we ordered like some dessert. And I think I ordered some pork. And remember, my father's dying. This is going to be one of the last times I'll ever see my father. And the guy, the owner of the the owner's son and the manager of the restaurant bar, when I asked for the bill, he told the waitress that it was on him. It was on him. And she said it's I'm taking care of the bill because Robert's a really good guy. So I didn't ask him to do any of that, right? I did not ask him to do any of that, but that was like one of the last things that my father actually heard. And it was a really touching moment for me. Really, really touching. And then after that, I'm not even sure I saw him after that, to be honest with you. I might have seen him maybe one more time and visited him, but that was pretty much it for him in public. And in fact, I tried to get a hotel room there at the hotel for him and my mother, but he never made it, right? But that moment was really a very good moment for me. And the reason I'm sharing the story with you is that, that was that could have gone sideways with him. If I had held a grudge and I'd said, fuck you, I'm never coming back to this place. There's another bar around the corner that I could go hang out and watch TV and they play my shit, right? That I would never have been able to have that moment with my father in that time and place. So I'm just sharing with you a reminder of how your destiny or how the future pivots really on choices you make in the present. And sometimes you don't have to win. Sometimes you don't have to be the person who drives a stake through the moment to drive your point home. Okay? That's just the way it is. And for me, at least, and you can take with it from whatever you want. But that's how it unfolded for me. Had I chosen differently, I would not have had that moment with my father. So, and there was just a lot of really weird syncs, like super, super weird syncs. Super, super, super weird syncs. And let me just tell you one of the weird things. Like the owner of the restaurant, great guy, totally great guy, shared the same name as my son, which is not a common name, by the way. Not a common name. And the guy who I'm telling you about has a sister. Okay, so there are two guys that own that hotel. And his father was one of them. This other guy who shared the same name as my son was another. Okay. So his sister had a kid, and she named the kid after the owner who shares the same name as my son. I don't want to say my son's name at this point. That's not really that important. But all three had the same name. And here's the kicker. Her son was born on the same day, not the same year, but the same day as my son. Very wild, crazy, sinkety sink stuff, right? I'm like, wow, this is really, really interesting. So I knew that, I'd kind of found my place. That was my vortex. That place was like my portal, and I totally miss it. And I know those guys sold it, so it's not in the same hands anyway. You move on, you have these experiences, and life is it's a river, right? It's a river in time. Anyway, memories of the Hotel Mac in Point Richmond, and Point Richmond of itself was a whole other. And I was doing shows and writing a lot in Point Richmond. And, maybe I'll pull up some other stories at another time. So here we go. Let's move into the present now. Let's get into present time, which is an important time, obviously, because it's the time that we're sharing together, even though it may bifurcate and shoot us off into any number of other timelines. Let me provide you with some updates here. Now, I wanted to share with you this piece around the craziness around the Irish culture, at least at this point in time, and the Irish government at this point. I remember I was going to tell you that I'm going to be bringing this back to Ireland, to Great Britain, and to the good old UK at Emerald Isles. And I want to show you something which will clue you into the absolute absurdity of our time. So this guy is not Irish. I'm going to tell you a story. He's Scottish. It's a very different ish. The Scots and the Irish are very different. But let me just show this to you, okay? Scottish man convicted of calling ex-girlfriend's boyfriend a leprechaun. You cannot make this shit up, okay? You can't make this shit up. This is by Jonathan Turley. And this guy, Jonathan Turley, if I'm not mistaken, is a constitutional lawyer. I've been a critic of the alarming criminalizing of speech in Great Britain through hate speech laws. Such laws create an insatiable appetite for greater and greater speech regulation and create a sense of empowerment among citizens to silence those with whom they disagree. Now, a Scottish man has been convicted of a message that was grossly offensive, indecent, or menacing. According to the Evening Express, the prosecutor, appropriately named Susan Love, cited the fact that Terry Myers, 41, called the Irish boyfriend of his ex-girlfriend a leprechaun. Love declared that the male was threatening, but added that it was a racially aggravated offense due to the use of the word leprechaun. So I'm thinking now that this sets the precedent for the leprechaun to remain on the cereal box cover of Lucky Charms. So I think that the Lucky Charm leprechaun has been qualified and classified as being culturally appropriate. His defense attorney said that the two men had a petty and pathetic history and that his client regretted the use of the term. Oh my God. Now we're getting on the knee. He was nevertheless found guilty. You see, you get on the knee right there and you're still going to pay the price. Okay. You remember when an apology kind of got you off the hook? The apology doesn't get you off the hook now. It just doesn't. So he was fined $350. That's 280 pounds for the offense. We've been following here and here and here and here and here and here and here. The worsening situation in England concerning free speech. The problem is trying to draw such lines rather than embracing free speech as protecting not just popular but unpopular and even hateful speech. Once you start as a government to criminalize speech, you end up on a slippery slope of censorship, and we know that to be true. What constitutes hate speech remains a highly subjective matter, and we have seen a steady expansion of prohibited terms and words and even gestures. We've been following here and here and here. These are the links, right? I'm not going to get into them. I will put the link here in the show page at the end. The worsening situation in England concerning free speech. As noted in a prior column, free speech appears to be dying in the West. The increasing criminalization of speech under discrimination, hate, and blasphemy laws. As someone of Irish and Italian descent, I would not be insulted to be called a leprechaun. Instead, being called a magical figure is a substantial improvement from the usual abuse that tends to follow more scatological than magical themes. All right, so I don't want that. I'm going to go back here. So apparently calling somebody a leprechaun is now an offense in England. What happens if you call somebody a unicorn? Oh, well, we know what a unicorn stands for. We know exactly what you meant by saying the word unicorn. Oh, really? Did you? Okay. The bandwidth for speech gets narrower and narrower and narrower. Narrower and narrower and narrower. And I've talked about this before. I talked about this a long time ago. And that ultimately freedom of expression and freedom of speech will be like the eye of a needle. Think about that for a moment. The only thing that'll be acceptable is whatever can go through the eye of a needle. And there is a biblical reference for that if you know exactly what I'm talking about, right? So this very wide aperture is getting more and more microscopic in a lot of ways. Very microscopic. You know what fits through the eye of a needle? A laser beam. That's what fits through the eye of a needle. Just remember that. A laser beam. All right. We got more to cover here today. I'm going to get into some of the craziness. Some of the real craziness. Let's see. What do we have here? Let me give you a little more craziness. From leprechauns to aliens. We are now in the postmodern category, the postmodern territory of attacking not just theoretical race or theoretical individuals connected to race, but we're now in the postmodern territory of attacking people based on mythological or magical creatures and or even aliens. Case in point, I'll show this to you. Wrap your head and bend your mind around this. Professor who gave advice on toppling obelisk, and this is a professor who basically online said, here's how you topple an obelisk, because obviously they are versed in obelisks and ancient Egyptian theoretical structures, right? Now wants to show ancient aliens canned. So this is that professor. You know, I'm looking at this picture. This professor is looking a lot like my friend from the bar in the hotel in Point Richmond. I'm just saying. Look at those forearms. Look at that jaw. I think this professor might be, how shall we say, biologically aligned. Okay, here we go. The professor who recently showed protesters how to pull down obelisks during this current statue toppling craze is now demanding the show Ancient Aliens be taken off the air. The popular History Channel offering, according to its website, explores the controversial theory that extraterrestrials have visited Earth for millions of years. From the age of the dinosaurs to ancient Egypt, from early cave drawings to continued mass sightings in the U.S., the description continues. Each episode gives historic depths, blah, 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 blah. No doubt it's part of the Egypt. It's the part about Egypt, right? So there's Egypt part in here, right? That ticks off University of Alabama, Birmingham archaeology professor Sarah Parsak. In a series of tweets Friday, Parsak called the program one of the most racist shows on TV and needs to be canceled permanently. It's an entire show that exists to discredit the extraordinary artistic and architectural accomplishments of past and current peoples, Parsak tweeted. In other words, any conjecture that wondrous monuments like the ancient Egyptians and Easter Island were constructed either by or with the guidance of extraterrestrial beings is a racist endeavor because people of color actually built them. Just nobody mentioned Stonehenge since it's in England. If the History Channel and other outlets persist in this practice, Parsak will do her best to cancel you. Could it be aliens? No, it fucking isn't. So done. I'm blocking and reporting any racists who dare appear on my TL. That's her Twitter line, or I don't know, with their ish. And I'm batting 100% lately with getting accounts banned. So take your chances. I'm 2 glasses of red wine in and feisty. Ooh. I wonder if she's drinking Opus 1. That Opus 1 might have led to that guy's suicide, theoretically. I'll be using my platform to get them deplatformed. I should have pushed harder before. No excuses. Time to buckle up and cancel racist trash affecting the minds of millions. Now, I'm not a huge Ancient Aliens guy. I have my own kind of issues with the show. Here we go. Just because white people couldn't do it doesn't mean it was aliens. There we go. How, though? They apply the same formula to ancient European structures as well. It's anti-science, yes, but it's more for entertainment. Racist and also anti-science. Now we're getting into, it's anti-science. It's anti-science. So science is the antidote to racism because science is based on secular humanism and atheism. Ancient Aliens is but the latest offering. The long-lasting genre. The German book Chariots of the Gods, Unsolved Mysteries of the Past, arguably kickstarted the fascination back in 1968. A character in the 1982 classic The Thing mentions this book as the film's cast considers the origins of the creature they've discovered. Chariots of the Gods, man. Right. Professor Parsak would do well to heed the words of William Shatner, who in a hilarious Saturday Night Live sketch in 1986 gave an important piece of advice to ironically similar topic Star Trek fans. It's just a TV show. By the way, Shatner prefaced his words with, "Get a life, will you?" So here we go now. They're going after the ancient alien past. So apparently, this person has, I'd love to understand what this person thinks about Tartaria. I love their take on Tartaria. That might be very, very interesting. I'd love their take on a lot of the other pieces of evidence that we've seen that clearly indicates that something else happened, right? Something else happened at another point in time. And I don't want to get into it this show. I don't have a lot of time. So now we're attacking people for calling somebody a leprechaun. And now they're going after ancient aliens because the whole ancient alien thing is based on anti-science and ultimately at its core is racist. Really, maybe it might be planetist, extraterrestrialist, right? It might be, it's like, well, what if humans really did this thing? Except for, what if humans did it? If humans did it, then aren't we being like anti-humanist or something along those lines? I mean, that boggles the mind. This is the bizarre world we're living in now. And by the way, I do not watch Ancient Aliens. There's some interesting people that show up on that show. Some of them are interesting. Some of them are not so interesting. Long time ago, I had Georgios Tsoukalos on my show. Long time ago, this goes back to 2013. And I think that day I had Georgia. I think he was on the same day as George Norrie. I had George Norrie on my show a couple times. Giorgio was a complete a-hole, a complete and utter a-hole. And I can tell you right now, he doesn't believe anything about that show. Nothing whatsoever. Nothing. In fact, the reason why I know this is because he had a whole show about time travel. And I brought something up around time travel. And it was related to being in the show. And then he tells me time travel doesn't exist. Well, why do a effing show about time travel if it doesn't exist? Why? It's like you did the show, you did the voiceover, you did the narration, you did everything. You sponsored the people, you let them speak about time travel and all these different pieces here, and yet you're telling me now that it's ridiculous and time travel doesn't exist. And he almost stormed off my show. He was a total grade A-hole. All right. If they want to cancel the show, cancel because of that, not because of this ancient aliens is racist claptrap bullshit. Okay. There was something else I wanted to say about that. What was it? There's some. It's a related story. And maybe you've heard it before, but I'll share it because it is a related story. It's a personal story. So when I was a kid, my father and I watched the show Chariots of the Gods. Right, came out. There were two shows: Eric Von Däniken, Chariots of the Gods. The other one, I forget what it was. And it was I think Rod Steiger. No, Rod Serling, I think, narrated this thing. So we're really into this, right? We're really into it. We bought Chariots of the Gods. I read Chariots of the Gods. I think I was in the 8th grade when this happened. I'm not alone. There are a lot of guys my age, or people my age. I just don't want to say specifically guys. I don't want to. Yeah. There are people my age that read Chariots of the Gods, and a lot of them actually had a relationship with the material through one of their parents, usually the father. Okay. So then my father went really deep into it. He started to read the Bible, and he was looking, and this is a guy who had a 10th grade education. Okay. He started to read the Bible to try to find these correlations between what he was seeing through the Bible and anything that might relate to something even outside Ezekiel, which of course is the most famous description of this idea of aliens in the Bible. Right. And then he started to have like the most wild dreams. He started to, he had this dream, says it was so real. He said that in his dream, he was outside of our house and he saw a massive like column of very large UFOs like flying over the house. It was like almost like he was outside of his body. And it really spooked him significantly. So, whatever was happening with him, it opened him up in a very interesting way. So I was really into the material, and I actually gave a talk on it in my 8th grade class, and I laid it all out in my 8th grade class. And there was a guy who was the teacher for the same class. It was social studies, and he was going to teach the next period. So he wanted me to give the same presentation to his class in the 8th grade. And I'll never forget his name. His name was Dave Latham. Very nice guy. Super, super nice guy. and we talked about countries of the world, and I told him there were countries in Africa that I was really interested in. I told him I was really interested in Australia. So I really liked this guy. He was a really, really good guy. And so he brought me in. I got to get out of my other class, and I gave the talk to his class. My teacher, on the other hand, he was a very radical dude, and his last name was Sanchez. Okay, and he went to San Jose State, and he was a hardcore lefty, He hated the government. He hated Nixon, and he made his views quite open in our classroom. And we used to get into arguments a lot. We used to debate a lot, but he liked me. He eventually got fired because he was caught smoking dope with some of the kids at a school picnic. I shit you not. Okay, he lasted one term as a teacher, and he was gone. Okay, he couldn't handle the student teacher relationship. Yeah. Anyway, those were interesting times, middle school. But Dave Latham, wherever you are, I hope your life unfolded nicely. I hope you've had a great life, and I hope your teaching career was very successful because you were super cool to me. Okay, let me get on to another piece here. Another piece of high strange that we're dealing with. All right, so here we go. Now we're coming into coronavirus wave number 2. Now remember, we just had this eclipse. Where did the eclipse go? Where did it pass through? It passed through Southeast Asia, and we know that South Korea, was near the eclipse path because we looked at the eclipse path. So here we go, boys and girls. What are we seeing now out of South Korea? Bada bing. South Korea becomes first country to announce second wave of coronavirus. South Korea is in the midst of a second wave of coronavirus infections, health officials claimed on Monday. This is post-eclipse. Until now, the country had been hailed a success story for its handling of the worldwide virus pandemic. However, the Korea Centers for Disease Control, KCDC, not to be confused with JFKFC. That was an actual band name, by the way, JFKFC. John Fitzgerald Kennedy, Kentucky Fried Chicken, right? JFKFC. Reminds you of the name Brian Jonestown Massacre. Anyway, here we go. Health Minister Park Neung-hoo said 90 imported, and this is important now, 90 imported cases. 90, they imported them. I guess just like craft beer. Had been identified over the past week, a sharp rise from the previous week's 48. Now, we don't know if that 48 was imported or not. Homegrown cases of coronavirus, that might be a different story. But they had to get the special imported version of coronavirus because the imported stuff was always much more valuable. Like I remember buying records. The import was always the thing to get, right? Did you get the import? Well, no, I just waited for it to come out domestically. Oh, dude, you should have gotten the import, man. You should have gotten the import. You know why? Because there's a track on there that's got like 30 seconds more longer. They added it here in the domestic version. Okay. You should have gotten that import. And by the way, some of the imports might have actually sounded a little bit better, but maybe it's just because they were imports and you thought, man, this sounds better. It's an import. Anyway, he said the government faces a grave situation as health officials need not only to contain locally transmitted infections, but also manage imported cases. Countries including Saudi Arabia, Israel, and Iran have reported indications of a second wave. Oh, that's interesting. Let's look at those people. Let's look at those countries. Saudi Arabia. Now, even though Jared Kushner is buddy, pal with bin Salman, even though Trump did the sword dance and put his hands on the glowing orb known as the Earth, and did a huge arms deal with Saudi Arabia as one of the victorious talking points in the early moments of his administration, which I think was just absolutely ludicrous and even horrendous, to arm the Saudis so they could go out and kill a bunch of Yemenites. But that's just me. There they are, Saudi Arabia. And then we have Israel. And then we have Iran. Now, are all three of those countries random? Or maybe perhaps they might be linked in a way that, well, maybe they're linked in a way that we don't really, or most people don't really understand or know. But if you are in the know, you will understand that they are directly linked in many regards. Iran having one of the largest Jewish populations outside of Israel, huge numbers of practicing people of the Jewish faith live in Iran, and they are allowed to practice without any form of either segregation or any form of discrimination. And I've gone down this path before. The House of Saud actually migrated out of Judea to create Saudi Arabia. Maybe I'll go into that later this week just to show you guys, right? So now we've got all three of these. They're telling you there's a second wave coming. Are these countries really our friends? Like, I like the Persians, don't get me wrong. And I've met Israelis that are super cool. I've never met a Saudi Arabian, though. I will say that. I have not personally met a Saudi Arabian. I've met some Israelis. I used to go to these trance parties. And the Israelis were totally into like this trance music, like psytrance, which the music itself I found utterly repetitive and very uninteresting. But there was always like, visions of Buddha, and, it was always voot, 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 and then brrr, right, and everybody go nuts. They're nuts for a while. Then they go back down again. Anyway, I met some people, at these parties. They were all right. They were cool. Not my thing. The psytrance thing was not my thing, but it was very big with the whole Israeli thing. I met Persians. I met really great Persians. Some really cool people are Persians. Like I said, I used to be kind of friendly with Susan Dahim, who was kind of a star in Persia and became a very, very well-known world music singer. She's fantastic. So the second wave, we're wave in numbers of coronavirus cases, but South Korea is the first to have officially acknowledged it. Okay, so theoretically, they're our ally, whatever, right? But now it's coming out. Numbers have stayed low throughout the crisis. At the end of February, the country reported the peak, blah, blah, blah. So now the South Koreans are giving us the news. Coronavirus is back. It's back, and we knew it would be coming back. It was just a matter of time. It's Mercury retrograde, right? It's Mercury retrograde. Here it comes. Your old pal, coronavirus. Back again, second wave. Put those masks on. Get back in your home. We got more stuff to do. We have more psychologically operative moments that we need to take care of, and this is one of them. So that was part of the eclipse path. Just remember that. And we saw this again 6 months ago, eclipse path through southern China, right, through Hong Kong, and here it is again. Cycles. We're dealing with cycles. We talked about it already. There it is. You see how it works? See how this shit works? You don't have to be a high-level genius to understand this. You just need to understand patterns. You understand patterns, particularly as it relates to things like eclipses and even some very important transits, which we covered last night on the Sunday night show. And sometimes we cover here on a daily basis when I decide to bust out the astrology. There it is. The Mercury retrograde. Put your mask on, get your ass back home. That's what's going on. So the other thing that you need to understand here about all this, or another piece, I don't have a link to it, but the Indian government just gave the Indian army permission to use force if they encounter Chinese troops. Now remember, part of the June 21st chronological and historical canon was that on June 21st, what was it, around 1900? I think the year might have been maybe a little bit later than that. But China declared war. It was the Boxer Rebellion. They declared war on the West on June 21st. Okay, it was part of what we looked at. Me and Masaki looked at that on Friday's show. So here we go. The Indian government has told its troops, if you encounter these, because they weren't using guns, they're using bats and all kinds of crazy shit, right? But the next time a skirmish breaks out on the Pakistani border or maybe the Tibetan border in northern India, because that's where China would be coming in from, right? From those two places, that they've been instructed to use force, meaning that they could take a gun and shoot Chinese troops. Keep an eye on that. Keep an eye on that. It's an important detail. Okay, let's continue to look at a few of these newsworthy items here. So it is okay, it's fine to tear down statues. Whatever the statue is, it's part of the regime change playbook. We've seen it again and again and again. Whether it's Ulysses S. Grant, who theoretically defeated the South and liberated the South and put an end to theoretical slavery. Well, they're tearing down Grant statues. Go figure. They're tearing down abolitionist statues. It doesn't matter. Statuary. It is all part of the plan to eradicate the culture. It doesn't matter if the culture was pro-abolition or against abolition. It doesn't matter whether it was about liberation or incarceration. Oh, maybe it does matter about incarceration. That's something that is used time and time again, right? But they're tearing down the statuary. It's part of the regime change program. Now, you can do that. You can topple these figures. Junipero Serra got torn down in California. Probably not a bad thing. He was not a great guy, by the way. Junipero Serra was not a great guy. I know stories about what he did to some of those native tribes in California. Not a great guy. But guess what? He also wasn't theoretically white. Junipero Serra came from Spain. He was a Jesuit. Theoretically set up the mission system. Although with Tartaria, even that comes into some level of doubt and question of accuracy. So let me show you now what is not allowable. You can do everything that I just mentioned, right? You can tear down anything that is connected to the previous culture. But if you vandalize a Black Lives Matter sign, guess what? You're going to jail. 3 men in Thousand Oaks arrested for vandalizing Black Lives Matter sign. Welcome to the hypocrisy of the 21st century. Welcome to social programming. Welcome to mind control. Okay, welcome to the mind control program that we are now being deeply vested in. Right? 3 men in Thousand Oaks were caught on camera vandalizing the Black Lives Matter flag. The owner put up a surveillance camera to catch the vandals of the sign. One of the villains is a sheriff's office employee. The 3 men were arrested for vandal. You can vandalize anything, but you vandalize a Black Lives Matter fist and sign. So genocidal colonist. Right? So this apparently might have been a statue that had been torn down. They erected something new. They decided they were going to burn it down. No, you can't do that. You're basically stomping on their theoretical constitutional rights. Detectives recognized 60-year-old Darren Stone, an employee of the sheriff's office since 2005. An image is posted. The owner posted of the vandalism online. Stone was captured on camera. Interesting name, Stone, huh? It brings up something like the Georgia Guidestones. I tell you what, here you go. Here is a message for the avid and enthusiastic cancel culture agents from Antifa and Black Lives Matter. I've got a great thing that you could go tear down. It's a really great thing. And there seems to be a lot of you in this area that are very motivated, very, very motivated to eradicate any structures that have anything to do with the so-called culture. It's a thing called the Georgia Guidestones. You should go there. Go there and take them down. Go ahead. I'm giving you some great advice here. Go there and tear down the Georgia Guidestones. Let's see what happens. Let's see how quickly you're allowed to either desecrate or destroy or remove that structure. I guarantee you, you wouldn't last very long. But please, don't let me dissuade you. Don't let me dissuade you. It's a very powerful, very, very powerful testament, which basically says, hey, we're going to have a planet with 500 million people. A planet with 500 million people. You might like it. has some very interesting connections with sort of this green ideology. So you may not want to desecrate it. But I guarantee you that a lot of you that are part of this new cultural movement will not be one of the 500 million people that are going to be left over to be part of this planet and to essentially be slaves of the techno overlords. But please go investigate it. Go investigate it. I'm sure the professor from Alabama, Birmingham, College of Alabama, University of Alabama, Birmingham, might have some really good guidance and good techniques to tear down those structures. Go ahead and ask her. If you're on her Twitter feed, you can, Sarah Parsec, ask her, how about the Georgia Guidestones? How do we tear those down? She might have some really pertinent insight around this. Anyway, here we go. Stone is a service technician at the pretrial detention facility in Ventura. The official said he was off duty at both of the incidents. So you cannot do this. Oh, no. Oh, no, you can't do that. So we have moved into the realm of hate desecration, right? We have moved into the realm of hate desecration. The pernicious hate speech laws. That's not hate speech, by the way. It's just an action. So theoretically, if you want to tear down anything that has anything to do with this theoretical country that extends back to whatever theoretical timeline that we're talking about, you can do that. Have at it. Have at it. But any contemporary replacements of those symbols or statuary, no, 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 no can do. You cannot do that, okay? So please be advised, if you are going to eradicate that statuary, you do so at the risk of being arrested because you are actually infringing upon somebody else's rights. Think about that for a moment. But I will, again, encourage that the people who are really into removing the statuary, go check out the Georgia Guidestones. I think it'll be a really interesting thing to do. To me, the Georgia Guidestones is kind of racist, actually. And it kind of really does. You know, it feels like a eugenics program. It feels like a monument to eugenics. That's what it does. That's what it feels like. So if you're so inclined, in fact, the people in Chazopistan, Chazopistan, maybe they could like get on a bus and just go right to the Georgia. I mean, they're really into like marching. They're very into marching. They go down to the West Precinct and they wreak havoc down at the West Precinct in Seattle again and again and again. They shout, they shout, they shout, you know. They psychologically and psychically pillar the police there. Anyway, let me take you into the wonderful, burgeoning, postmodern American experiment known as Chazopistan. Check this out. I'm going to show this to you. This is from somebody who actually lives there. Theoretically, all right? They actually live there. Let me download this thing. That would be helpful. It'll be helpful because right now it's in my email. Let me do this. There it is. Because what I'm about to show you is absolutely and utterly terrifying in many regards. If you're not paying attention now, after reading this, I'm sure you will be. You may want to pass this along to certain people. Please, you know, pass the show along. If you like the show and you think somebody will benefit from watching, you know, what we talk about here and how we talk about it, because we do our very best to be respectful, right? We do our absolute best to be as respectful as possible because we are in the universalization of consciousness for all people, for all groups. Universalization. This is the key word here. Beyond individualization, beyond globalization, beyond nationalization, we're into universalization. That is the theme that we move into and embrace here. At least I do every single day. Okay. All right. I'm going to show you guys this. So check this out. So this is somebody who posted something on Facebook. My mother has a dear friend who lives on Capitol Hill in the Chaz area. She called her today to see if she is okay. She is not. They are banging on doors and demanding food and for the residents to order them food. If the residents don't give them what they want, their houses are being spray painted and they are pooping on their lawns. The garbage trucks have not been let in. The mail has not been let in. Where are the rights of those residents? My mom's friend is in her 70s, mid 70s, has lived in this house for her entire adult life and loves her community. She was sobbing on the phone to my mom. She is scared and has no recourse. If something were to happen to someone in that area, would they let an ambulance in? Of course not. We saw what happened, right? We saw what happened. There was no ambulance. They didn't let that in. We saw what happened. It was they had a murder and somebody got wounded. And there's actual video of the cops going in and trying to clear the area. And the people from Chazopistan turned on them and forced them out. They forced them out. I said, get the fuck out of here, leave pigs, whatever, right? So they were going in so that they can clear the area out so the EMS guys can go in and take care of whatever happened there. And the EMS guys could not go in. You know why? Because they chased the cops out and the cops could not secure the area. Okay. So this is really troubling on some level. And all this stuff that I'm talking about is troubling on some level. But that resident, this is really an important kind of idea to wrap your head around. That resident is stranded. I mean, theoretically, they could leave, but they'd be abandoning their house. And then what would happen then? These people would take it over and they would tear it apart. There would be like a wave of locusts descending upon her house, taking anything of value out of it, including, and then they would use that house until it was no longer usable and it would be an empty husk. Right. So in a lot of ways, she can't leave that house. Now, I understand that this is a show and tell moment for the current administration. I get it. Right. They're showing people that there are states' rights here. This is something that the federal government has been very, very good at. Starting with the coronavirus, we're going to step off. We're going to step back. We're going to allow the states to run the show and run it right into the ground if that's what they choose to do. And that's what's happening in a place like Washington and Seattle. Both Jenny Durkin and Jay Inslee have requested no federal intervention. Okay, I get it. States' rights. We're looking at it. There's a dark side to this. Like, what is really the outcome here? That's something to think about. Will states' rights be absolutely annihilated at some point? Because there's a decent side to states' rights, and then there's an indecent. I think the people of a state should theoretically determine how they want to live. So if that's how they want to live in Washington, if that's how they want to live, if that's the message, and if that's the broadcast, then you, as somebody in the state of Washington, I'm playing states' rights games now. You and a person in the state of Washington have to understand that. And maybe you're in Eastern Washington, which is a whole different critter. And if I was Eastern Washington, anything on the other side of the Cascades, I would look at leaving the state of Washington, because Eastern Washington is really the green belt of the state and even the entire nation. It's where they grow apples, potatoes are grown there, vegetables are grown in Eastern Washington. Okay. So if you're in Eastern Washington, I would say, maybe this is time for us to separate out from the state. Maybe Eastern Washington, you should carve out your own autonomous zone. That might be something that could be creative, interesting, might even support your own interests versus the interests of another part of the state, which you may not have any interest in at all. Now, you may be able to sell your product to, Fred Meyer or whatever, right? So you got the Fred Meyer with your onions and your apples and potatoes, whatever else you're selling. But that's really about it, right? That's the advantage that you have, the economic advantage. You also have to know that on some level, you're also empowering and enabling a type of governance that you yourself probably would not want to be under, unless, of course, you're kind of a controlled communist and part of the controlled opposition. That's a whole nother story altogether, right? Whole nother story altogether. But the state of Washington is letting you know this is what they're about. So you get to figure out whether or not you want to stay there. You want to be a part of this. Is that the state you want to be a part of? I used to get into this discussion with people around the abortion idea or the abortion issue. And if you were in a state that didn't allow abortions, maybe you don't want to be in that state. Maybe that's not your state. And I would say that to people. Well, so-and-so, this, you can't get an abortion. This, well, why would you want to stay there? Why would you want to stay there? Go to a state where you can get an abortion. Even if you don't want an abortion, but ideologically, it's important for you to have an abortion or to let somebody else have an abortion, go to that state. Go support that state, right? I mean, I think there's some credence to this. There's some credence to this. But here's the problem now, is that we don't understand, nor do we actually trust the people at a higher level inside of state governments. I mean, clearly there are people like Christy Whitler and Jay Inslee and these other people, right? That they are just fundamentally just bad people. They're bad people. Okay. I'm just calling it out as I see it. They're bad people. And they're encouraging extreme violence, especially in the state of Washington with Jay Inslee. They're encouraging and enabling it. But then there are other governors who don't appear to be that way. But when you dig down a little bit deeper, you kind of go, what's really going on here? What is real? And there are certain states where that's pretty evident. You're starting to see that now. You're starting to see these governors, which theoretically were governing red states, and they theoretically had a red, quote unquote, red idea, which is kind of funny too, right? It's funny that we talk about these red states, conservatism being red and all the well, red is the color of fucking communism. When we looked at red, it was like red diaper babies, red diaper babies. And blue was the opposite of red. Like if you weren't red, you were blue. You were true blue, right? You were true blue. You were a true blue American. And you weren't a red diaper baby. And guess what happened? They flipped it all. Now, all of a sudden, if you're blue, right, then guess you're on the side of the theoretical socialists. And if you're red, you're on the theoretical side of the conservatives. But that's not where the colors originated from. Just think about that. They've totally flipped that thing as well. It's like we're living in an alternative timeline here. It's crazy, right? But it's true. It's totally true. Maybe I should start wearing, I wear a lot of blue. Today I'm wearing teal. It's not quite blue. It's a blue-green. And by the way, in the Beanie and Smith crayons, the 64 color crayons, which I loved as a kid, those blue-green colors are my favorite. Like the aquamarines, the blue-greens, I love those colors. I love those crayons. They're great. By the way, when are they going to outlaw the paint Navajo white? That's coming. Navajo. I always thought about that. When I was an apartment manager, we'd always say, oh, well, you paint the walls Navajo white and the trim should be a darker beige, right? So you go down to the paint store, let me get about 5 gallons of that Navajo white. And even then I'm like, this is fucking ridiculous. And if I was a Navajo, man, I would not be down with this. By the way, I also want to just sort of touch in a little bit with hypocrisy, and we're starting to wind the show down. I'm just letting you know if you need to go. Starting to wind the show down a bit. But if you were a member of the Kansas City Chiefs, like say maybe Patrick Mahomes, how do you feel about that name, the Chiefs? Right? How do you feel about that, the Chiefs? Well, maybe it's a Zulu chieftain. Maybe that's okay, but that's really not what they're referring to. They're referring to the Kansas City Chiefs. That's what they're referring to, right? Chiefs being Indians. What about if you live in Atlanta and your team is the Atlanta Braves? Well, Braves not a bad word because brave, courage, right? If you were living in Atlanta, maybe you would take some sort of umbrage with this. What about the Washington Redskins? What about the Cleveland Indians? Okay. Where are the sort of wokey woke people, and especially the Kansas City Chiefs? Where's Pat Mahomes? I used to really be into Pat Mahomes. I liked him. He's a good kid. And now all of a sudden, wind him up and watch the NPC uncoil the NPC ideology. And I've really supported Pat. I think he's a Virgo. He's a great kid. He's still a great kid. I just think he's misguided. I think a lot of these people are just misguided. I actually like Steph Curry. I think Steph Curry, no matter what kind of weird ideology he's embracing, I can feel in the Steph Curry, and I think that that's a good human, even if he's handled and there's clearly indications that that could be true. I still like the guy. I think Steph Curry has a good soul. I do think Steph Curry has a soul, by the way. I feel that about the guy. But he's doing interviews with, maybe he doesn't. I don't know if he has a soul. I'm not going to play overlord with him. I like the guy, but he seems very highly, 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 how do I say this? Maneuvered in a lot of ways. And Pat's the same way. What's interesting is they're Virgo Pisces. They represent the polarity. And I do like Pat. I've always liked. I watched him in college. I said, this guy's going to be a fucking great quarterback. Just watch him. He does things that I've never seen anybody else do before. And I couldn't believe that certain teams were passing on this guy. It's like, Jesus, I watched him play. He played at Texas Tech, right? He played at Tech. Am I right? Yeah. Cliff Kingsbury was his coach. Great player. Totally. And a good kid. I mean, just a good kid. But now, he's part of the chorus. He's part of the woke chorus. There was another thing I wanted to show you regarding the Chaz stuff. Maybe I'll save it till tomorrow and not just bust everything out today. It was, again, troubling, having to do with more violence inside of Chaz. It was the cop stuff. I wanted to show you the cop stuff, but I'll bust that out tomorrow. All right, let me get on here with you guys and find out where you're at. Let's see. What do we have here? I'm wondering why we're going to get a few Hopi players in the NBA, just to balance things out a bit. I've talked about the NBA before. And what's really interesting with the NBA is that I look at sports, and sports has been tremendous to the so-called Black and African American community, because obviously they've really excelled in sports, right? Not to the exclusion of other so-called races or people, because theoretically many other people have done quite well, right? Anthony Munoz is in the Hall of Fame, played tackle for the Cincinnati Bengals. Okay, he comes out of LA, right? We've had people from the Samoan community, incredibly gifted athletes. We've had so-called white people, really good athletes. We've had so-called Jewish people, really good athletes. I remember there was a kicker for the New York Giants. The New York Giants had these interesting kickers. They had a Kenyan named Donald Igwebikwe, which I thought was one of the great names in football at that time. They had a Kenyan kicker, and they had a guy from Persia, Ali Haji Sheikh, right? So, I mean, just on one team alone, you've seen two people from other cultures, prosper. Asians have prospered. Baseball, South Koreans, right? Taiwanese. There's people from Curacao. I mean, come on now. But the NFL, the NBA have been really, really, in a lot of ways, a real godsend for the so-called Black American community. It's like you got scholarships, go to college, you get generational money. You get generational money. Think about that. Generational money. And there have been some guys that have done incredible things. One of my favorite players is a guy by the name of Warrick Dunn, who used to play running back for the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. Warrick Dunn every year builds a house for somebody. Every year, without fanfare. That has been his mission since he entered the National Football League. How is Warrick Dunn able to do that? He's been able to do it because he had pro sports. He was able to use his money. He was able to use his connections. He was able to connect him with the community. And he's done really good work. Really, really good work. And, I've touted him in the past. And there are other athletes who've done really tremendous work in this area. They don't get the publicity. They don't get the accolades. You dig deep enough, you'll find about what Warrick Dunn has done. Okay. And he was able to do it because of the sport that he played and the people that supported him along the way. Okay. And by the way, that is not systemic. Actually, it is systemic. The support is systemic. It is. And part of it is self-serving. Because coaches say, geez, these guys are great athletes. I got to get them into my program. So the support is systemic. Trust me, it is. If you're a coach, you want great athletes. It's just the way it is. But the NBA basically decided to outsource their so-called white players. It's just an observation. Most of the white players come from Europe. They come from Serbia or they come from Germany. Some of them come from Israel. Some of them come from Croatia. And this is true. Some of them come from France. Some come from Australia, like Andrew Bogut. Right. So the NBA got onto the globalist program and started outsourcing their so-called white players. Right. You just don't see a lot of so-called white players in the NBA. Well, is it because they can't play? I really don't think so. Some of them are there. Some of them can't play. Right. And I've thought about this. I thought, well, why is it? And again, at the risk of being banned or whatever, I'm going to just put this out here. Why is it that the European players are in the NBA? Well, first of all, they're good. They're good. They're good players. Okay. And if you're a team, you'll take a good player, period, end of story. But then I thought about it, and it's because the European players get to play. They get to play. Right? They get to play on their youth teams. They get to play on their travel teams. They get to play in lower league teams in Europe. Okay, they get to play. And the way that Europe trains its players is very, very different than how we train players in America. And even Mark Cuban, who's a total tool, mentioned this. He got rebuked for this. He said, we need more players like the European players in our league. And the Dallas Mavericks have a history of bringing European players onto their team. Dirk Nowitzki was one of the prime examples. Steve Nash, who's a Canadian, didn't play in Europe, but another guy played for the Mavericks. Right? So they've got a history of bringing European players onto that team. Why? Because they know how to play every single position. When you go to Europe and you're part of the basketball circuit in Europe, you learn how to play guard, you learn how to play forward, you learn how to play center. It doesn't matter what height you are, you learn all the positions, all of them. And you come into the NBA and you know every single position. You can pass, you can score, you can defend, whatever, right? But the bottom line is that they get to play. Now, here in the United States, that's not really the case because theoretically, the United States is a meritocracy. And again, if you're a coach and you got a guy who can jump out of the gym, you're going to play that guy. You're going to play him. You're going to play him from a very young age because you know that athleticism is going to help you win a game. It's just the way it is. All right. So you can jump out of the gym. It doesn't mean you're so-called Black American or white American, right? You can do that. Rex Chapman, great player. He was a great player. He had, major springs. Rex Chapman. Pete Maravich. Today's Pete Maravich's birthday. Pistol Pete Maravich. Great player. Okay. You got a chance to play. But that the whole paradigm has shifted, right? It's shifted. So that by the time a so-called quote unquote white player would enter into high school and then the college level, that by that time they're somewhere down on the bench. They may be 6th, 7th, 8th, 9th, 10th guy coming off the bench. And that's the truth. I'm just telling you that's the truth. And it's because theoretically sports is a meritocracy. And so coaches reward athleticism. I've been a coach. I know what that's like, right? But that's not the case in Europe because there's a whole different track in terms of people being able to play. So this is just a notice, right? And I understand. I understand why this has occurred. I understand why the NBA is like overwhelming these so-called Black and African American. It's been really good to that community. So is the National Football League. And unfortunately now they're going to just, crush the NBA. Well, look, the NBA, I've walked away from. In fact, I've walked away from all sports. It's just become so politicized. And I don't care if the NFL comes back. I don't care if Roger Goodell takes on Anthony Fauci. I don't give a shit. I'm done with the NFL. I'm done with the NBA. MLB, they're just getting canceled. We may never see another professional baseball game again in this country. But I'm just being straight up with you. Okay, so if you like baseball, you want to watch baseball, follow the Japanese league, follow the Mexican league. You won't be able to follow it here. Maybe certainly not this year, and I'm moving forward, very doubtful. Very, very doubtful. So these are very, very interesting times, and it takes clarity, it takes perception, it takes kind of an understanding of the dynamics, and not to the exclusion of other people. And again, I want to make that really clear, not to the exclusion of other people. Anytime we exclude one group against another, and we take one group and we make that group the talking point, we make that one group the scapegoat for any other group, and this is true now, I'm just going all the way across the bandwidth, right? All the way across the bandwidth. What it does, it takes our own personal responsibility out of the equation. And I can just check boxes like, well, this group does this, and this group does that, this group does this. And there are instances where clearly they do, okay? They do, but we want to bring this home. We want to bring it home and really bring it about you and what you're doing and how you're going to transform your life. And you can see all this shit, right? You can see it, but you got to have a machete. You got to have a psychic machete to get through this time. And what you got to do is you got to build yourself up. Build yourself up. Build up your mind, build up your heart, build up your spirit, and build up your body. Do the best you can. When you get strong in those areas, right, you will attract other people. You'll attract other sympathetic minds. This is how the game works. And then guess what happens? You get strong together. And you look at the world and life through a lens of truth and love. And it doesn't matter what color you are, because that's what unites us, truth and love. All right, that's a wrap. I'm out of here today. Use your head in order to discern what's real, your heart to stay open to what's possible. I'm Robert Phoenix, broadcast to you live from Hill Country. I'll be back tomorrow, 8:45. Be here or be square or be whatever you want to be. Just be here. I'll see you guys later. Bye for now.